Savannah, Georgia is the kind of town where you can feel the history in the air. The cobblestone streets, lined with ancient oak trees draped in Spanish moss, give the place an almost timeless feel. There's a certain charm here that you don't find in the hustle and bustle of big cities. People take their time, neighbors know each other's names, and the pace of life is just a bit slower. It's the perfect place to start fresh, or so I thought. My name is Ethan, and I moved to Savannah a few months ago. After years of living in New York, I needed a change. The constant noise, the never-ending rush, it all became too much. So when I stumbled upon an old house for sale on the outskirts of Savannah, I jumped at the opportunity. The house was charming in a rustic way, with its creaky wooden floors and antique fixtures. It felt like a place where I could finally breathe. The locals were friendly, though I couldn't shake the feeling that there was something they weren't telling me about my new home. They spoke in hushed tones when I mentioned where I lived, exchanging glances that made me uneasy. But I chalked it up to small-town quirks and tried to ignore the nagging feeling in the back of my mind. The first few weeks in the house were uneventful. I spent my days exploring the town, getting to know my neighbors, and trying to settle into my new routine. At night, the house was eerily quiet, a stark contrast to the constant noise of the city. It took some getting used to, but I welcomed the tranquility. Little did I know, my peaceful new life in Savannah was about to take a dark and terrifying turn. The house I thought would be my sanctuary held secrets that were desperate to be uncovered. And it all started with those damn scratch marks on my door. It all started one chilly morning in late October. I had just brewed a fresh pot of coffee and was about to head out to grab the newspaper when I noticed something odd on my front door. There, faint but unmistakable, were a series of scratch marks. At first, I thought it was the work of some stray animal, maybe a raccoon or a neighborhood cat. The scratches were shallow, barely noticeable, so I didn't give them much thought. But the next morning, they were back. And this time, they were deeper. I stood on my porch, staring at the door, a sense of unease creeping up my spine. The scratches seemed too deliberate, too precise to be from an animal. They formed a pattern almost like someone or something was trying to get my attention. I ran my fingers over the fresh marks, feeling the roughness of the wood where it had been gouged. It was unsettling, but I tried to brush it off as a coincidence. However, as the nights went by, the scratches became a nightly occurrence. Each morning, I would wake up to find new marks on the door, each set deeper and more aggressive than the last. It was as if whatever was making them was growing more desperate. The pattern was also becoming more intricate, almost like some kind of message I couldn't decipher. I installed a motion-activated camera, hoping to catch the culprit in the act. But every time I checked the footage, there was nothing. The camera would glitch or cut out completely during the hours the scratches appeared. It made no sense, and my frustration grew alongside my fear. Something was targeting me, and I had no idea why. One particularly cold night, I decided to stay up and watch from the window. Wrapped in a blanket, I sat in the dark, eyes glued to the front door. The hours dragged on, and just as I was about to give up and head to bed, I heard it, the faint, unmistakable sound of scratching. My heart pounded in my chest as I strained to see what was causing it, but there was nothing there. The door moved slightly, the wood groaning under the pressure of invisible claws. Panic set in. I burst out of the house, flashlight in hand, scanning the yard for any signs of life. But there was nothing. No animals, no people, nothing that could explain the relentless, nightly assaults on my door. I was left standing there, breath visible in the cold night air, feeling more alone and vulnerable than ever. By now, the scratches had gone from a nuisance to a full-blown obsession. I couldn't sleep, couldn't focus on anything but the growing dread that something was trying to get to me. And as each night passed, the marks on my door became a grim reminder that whatever it wasn't going to stop until it got what it wanted. The scratches were driving me mad. I knew I had to find out what was causing them, so I decided to dig into the history of my house. Maybe there was something about this place that I didn't know, something that could explain the relentless marks on my door. I started at the local library, hoping to find some old records or documents. Savannah, with its rich history, was bound to have archives that could shed some light on my house. The librarian, an elderly woman with sharp eyes behind her glasses, was more than happy to help. She led me to a dusty corner of the library filled with old newspapers and property records. I spent hours sifting through yellowed pages and brittle documents, but it was a single newspaper article from the late 1960s that caught my attention. The headline read, "Local woman found dead in her home. Murder suspected." My heart raced as I read the article, detailing the tragic death of a young woman named Anna Thompson. She had lived in my house. Anna was found brutally murdered, her body discovered in the attic. The case had shocked the town, but despite an intense investigation, her killer was never found. The article mentioned rumors of a cover-up, whispers that someone powerful in the community had a hand in her death and the subsequent hush-up. The more I read about Anna, the more I felt a connection to her. She was only 24 when she died, full of life and promise, her future cruelly snatched away. I found myself haunted by her story, the injustice of it all gnawing at me. Could the scratches be connected to her? Was her spirit trying to communicate, to seek justice after all these years? Driven by a need to know more, I visited the town's historical society. There, I found old photographs of Anna and my house. One photo, in particular, sent chills down my spine. It showed Anna standing on the porch, smiling, with the same front door behind her. The door was new back then, unmarked and pristine. I couldn't help but wonder how it had all gone so wrong. As I delved deeper, I uncovered more disturbing details. Anna had been engaged to a local politician's son, a man named Robert. Their relationship was tumultuous, marred by rumors of abuse and infidelity. Many believed Robert was involved in her death, but his family's influence had kept his name out of the official records. It all pointed to a dark secret that had been buried along with Anna. The pieces were starting to fit together. The scratches, the eerie presence in the house. It all made sense if Anna's restless spirit was trying to reach out, seeking the justice she never received. But what could I do? How could I help a ghost find peace? One night, I decided to try and communicate with her. I sat in the living room, surrounded by the old photos and documents I had found. "Anna?" I whispered, feeling foolish but desperate. "If you're here, if you're trying to tell me something, I'm listening. I want to help you." The room grew cold, and I felt a chill run down my spine. The scratches on the door intensified, loud and urgent, as if in response. It was terrifying, but it also confirmed my suspicions. Anna was here, and she was trying to tell me something. The only question was, could I unravel the mystery in time to give her the peace she deserved? After my attempt to communicate with Anna, things in the house went from unsettling to downright terrifying. It started with subtle changes. The temperature would drop suddenly, leaving me shivering even in the middle of a warm day. Cold spots appeared in random places, so chilling they felt like stepping into a freezer. No matter how high I turned up the heat, the cold would seep through, making the house feel like a tomb. Then came the noises. At first, it was faint whispers, just on the edge of hearing, making me question if I was imagining things. But soon they grew louder, more distinct. Voices that seemed to come from the walls, echoing through the halls. I would hear sobbing, desperate and filled with sorrow, followed by angry murmurs. It was as if the house itself was speaking, telling a story of pain and betrayal. One night, as I was lying in bed, I heard footsteps in the hallway. Slow, deliberate. They creaked on the old wooden floors, growing closer to my bedroom. I held my breath, heart pounding, as the footsteps stopped right outside my door. The knob rattled slightly, as if someone was trying to turn it. I leapt out of bed, flung the door open, but there was no one there, just the cold, empty hallway staring back at me. The apparitions started soon after. I would catch glimpses of a figure out of the corner of my eye, a woman in a white dress, her face pale and eyes hollow. She would appear in mirrors just for a split second before vanishing. Once, I saw her standing at the foot of my bed, her expression a mix of sadness and anger. I blinked, and she was gone, but the feeling of her presence lingered. The worst was the attic. I had avoided it ever since I learned about Anna's death, but now it seemed to call to me. Strange noises emanated from above, thumps, dragging sounds, and sometimes a faint, muffled scream. It felt like the heart of the house's darkness, a place where the past refused to stay buried. One particularly harrowing evening, I decided to confront whatever was up there. Armed with nothing but a flashlight, I climbed the creaky stairs to the attic. The air grew colder with each step, and the sense of dread was almost suffocating. The attic door was slightly ajar, and as I pushed it open, my flashlight flickered, casting eerie shadows on the walls. The room was filled with old furniture, covered in dust and cobwebs. In the center, I saw her, Anna. She stood there, her spectral form translucent, yet vividly clear in the dim light. Her eyes locked onto mine, and I felt a wave of emotion crash over me. Fear, anger, and an overwhelming sadness. She pointed to a corner of the attic, and as I followed her gaze, I saw a small, hidden compartment in the floor. Inside the compartment, I found an old, tattered diary. Anna's diary. The pages were yellowed with age, but the words were still legible. They detailed her life, her fears, and ultimately, the truth about her death. She had been betrayed by Robert, her fiancé, who killed her in a fit of rage and had his influential family cover it up. The scratches, the cold, the apparitions. It was all Anna's desperate plea for justice. As I read the final entry, I felt her presence beside me. She wasn't angry anymore. There was a sense of peace, as if she knew I was going to help her. I promised her I would bring the truth to light, no matter the cost. The room warmed slightly, and I saw her one last time, a faint smile on her lips before she faded away. The house was still haunted, but now I knew why. Anna's story needed to be told, her killer brought to justice. Only then could the scratches stop, and her spirit finally rest in peace. With Anna's diary in hand, I finally had the answers I had been seeking. The entries detailed her life, filled with both joy and torment. The deeper I delved into her words, the more I understood the true horror of what had happened to her. Anna had been deeply in love with Robert, a charming man who hid his true nature behind a veneer of charisma. Their engagement had been the talk of the town, a match that seemed perfect on the surface. But as I read on, the diary revealed a darker side to Robert. He was possessive, abusive, and prone to violent outbursts. Anna had lived in constant fear, her dreams of a happy life shattered by his cruelty. The night of her murder, Anna wrote about confronting Robert after discovering his infidelity. Enraged, he had strangled her in a fit of uncontrollable fury, his powerful family then covering up the crime to protect their reputation. The scratches on my door, I realized, were Anna's desperate attempts to reach out from beyond the grave, to tell her story and seek justice for the wrongs she had suffered. Understanding this, I felt a heavy weight of responsibility. Anna's spirit wasn't merely haunting the house. She was demanding justice, and the scratches were her way of communicating her pain and desperation. Each mark was a cry for help, a plea for someone to acknowledge her suffering and take action. That night, as I sat in the living room with Anna's diary spread out before me, I spoke to her again. "Anna," I whispered, feeling a cold breeze sweep through the room. "I know what happened to you. I promise I will bring your story to light. I will make sure Robert and his family are exposed." Suddenly, the temperature dropped dramatically, and the lights flickered. I felt a presence in the room. Anna was there. Her apparition materialized, clearer than ever before. Her eyes, once filled with anger and sadness, now looked at me with a glimmer of hope. She pointed towards the diary, specifically to the last few pages, where she had detailed the events leading up to her death. I read those pages again, noting every detail. Anna had mentioned a locket that Robert had given her, a piece of evidence she had hidden in the attic, hoping it would one day be found. She believed it held a clue to his guilt. I searched the attic thoroughly, and after hours of combing through the dust and shadows, I found it. A small, ornate locket engraved with Robert's initials. With this new evidence, I knew I had enough to reopen the case. I reached out to a local journalist, someone with a reputation for exposing corruption and seeking justice. She was intrigued by Anna's story and agreed to help me bring the truth to light. In the days that followed, the scratches on the door ceased. The house, once cold and unwelcoming, began to feel warmer, almost peaceful. It was as if Anna knew that her story was finally being told, that justice was on its way. The journalist's investigation gained traction, uncovering more evidence and witnesses who had been silenced by fear and influence. The town of Savannah was rocked by the revelations. Robert's family, unable to suppress the truth any longer, faced public outrage and legal scrutiny. The cold case was officially reopened, and the truth about Anna's tragic death was finally brought to light. Through it all, I felt Anna's presence less and less. The house grew quieter, the eerie occurrences subsiding. One night, as I was preparing for bed, I saw her one last time. She stood by the window looking out towards the town. When she turned to me, there was a sense of peace in her eyes. She nodded, a silent thank you, and then she was gone, her spirit finally at rest. Anna had found her justice, and with it, her peace. The scratches on the door were a thing of the past, a haunting reminder of a story that needed to be told. And as for me, I was left with the knowledge that sometimes the past doesn't stay buried, and the spirits of those wronged will find a way to seek the justice they deserve. The town was buzzing with the revelations unearthed by the journalist's investigation. Anna's story was out in the open, and the pressure on Robert's family was mounting. But I knew this wasn't enough. Anna's spirit still lingered, waiting for true justice. The locket I had found was a crucial piece of evidence, but there was one final step to ensure Anna's peace. One stormy evening, with the wind howling outside and rain lashing against the windows, I sat in the living room, the air heavy with anticipation. I had arranged a meeting with the journalist at my house to go over the final details. She believed the locket and diary, combined with the testimonies and evidence she had gathered, were enough to convict Robert. But as the night wore on and she hadn't arrived yet, I began to feel a growing sense of dread. Suddenly, the room grew icy cold, and the familiar feeling of Anna's presence washed over me. I turned to see her standing at the top of the stairs, her figure more defined than ever. Her eyes locked onto mine, filled with an urgency that sent chills down my spine. "Anna," I called out, my voice trembling. "What do you need me to do?" She pointed towards the front door, and I knew what she wanted. I grabbed the locket and the diary, throwing on my coat and braving the storm outside. The wind whipped around me as I made my way to the old cemetery where Anna was buried. The place was eerie at night, shadows dancing between the gravestones as lightning illuminated the sky. I reached Anna's grave, and there, waiting in the downpour, was the journalist. She looked at me with a mixture of confusion and determination. "Ethan, what are we doing here?" she shouted over the wind. "Anna's grave," I replied. "We need to do something here." Together, we knelt by Anna's headstone, the rain soaking us to the bone. I placed the locket and the diary on her grave, hoping this act would finally bring her the peace she deserved. The wind howled louder, and the temperature dropped further, making it almost unbearable to stand there. Then, I heard it. A voice, soft and ethereal, carried on the wind. It was Anna's voice. "Thank you," she whispered, her tone filled with a sense of relief. I felt her presence surround us, warm and comforting despite the storm's fury. The ground beneath us trembled, and a soft glow emanated from Anna's grave. I looked at the journalist, her eyes wide with a mixture of awe and fear. "Is this really happening?" she murmured. The glow intensified, and Anna's spirit appeared before us, more solid than ever. She looked at me with gratitude, then turned her gaze towards the town, where Robert's family resided. Her form began to fade, the glow dimming as the storm began to subside. I knew then that she had found her peace, her story finally told, and her killer facing the justice he deserved. In the days that followed, the evidence we had presented, along with the newfound public interest, led to Robert's arrest. The town of Savannah, once shrouded in the mystery of Anna's death, now breathed a sigh of relief. The house, once a source of terror, now felt like a home again, free from the restless spirit that had haunted it. As I settled back into my life, I couldn't help but think about the events that had transpired. Anna had found her justice, and in doing so, she had given me a purpose. I felt a deep connection to her, a bond formed through our shared journey to uncover the truth. One evening, as I sat on the porch, the sun setting in a blaze of orange and red, I felt a warm breeze pass by, rustling the leaves gently. I knew it was Anna, her spirit finally at rest, her story now a part of Savannah's history. And with that, the house and I both found a new beginning, free from the shadows of the past. Enjoyed it? Give a like and spread the terror. Subscribe and hit the bell so you don't miss any scares. Join our dark community.